Let's talk about the talking point for today, which is focusing on the size of the government. Now, there are a host of issues attached to the current economic crisis that Nigeria is dealing with, and one of the issues at the center of the conversation is the cost of governance as Nigerians continue to navigate this quite turbulent time. And the Tinubu administration has faced a growing number of criticism for its perceived management of the resources of the country, especially when it comes to the size of the government, especially as the president just hinted at the possibility of creating yet another ministry to handle the case of livestock management in this country, bringing Nigerians to ask the question, can we afford an even bigger government going forward, especially when the president has hinted at the possibility of downsizing the size of government institutions following its adoption of the Oronsai report. Join us on the program is a research analyst at the Center for Democracy and Development, Mr. Angalapu. Dengiyefa Angalapu is joining us to navigate this issue of Nigeria's cost of governance as well as the size of the government. Good morning to you. It's been a while. Thank you so much for stopping by this morning. It's good to see you.
Good morning. Thank you for
having me. How's Nigeria been treating you?
Well, I mean, we've been moving on day by day.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a familiar tale, I can assure you. Where do you stand on this? Is this a storm in a teacup? Are people worried about absolutely nothing? Does it matter how big or small the size of government is as long as issues are being addressed?
Yeah, so absolutely, I think it matters. And I think we've addressed this issue somewhat on this program during the time that the Tinubu administration adopted the Oronsai report. You know, I felt it was a very good idea. I mean, and they gave themselves timeline. Let's not forget, they said 3 months. Well, the 3 months has really elapsed, and we've not really seen, we've not seen any substantial progress on that report. It's almost like, it's a bygone, one story that has gone by, really. But I really think that it's something that is very, very important at a time where the presidency is telling Nigerians to sacrifice. At this point, I would always tell people that at this moment, there is nothing for Nigerians to sacrifice. In fact, at this time, we are the sacrifice itself, really. And, when you are the sacrifice, it's more like you're laying yourself at the altar, and then it's really very, very saddening. I woke up to the news, the news that we are going to be probably having a livestock ministry, and I was wondering why do we have the Ministry of Agriculture? Maybe some days someday we are going to be having another ministry for ruminant animals and non-ruminant animals, and then different. So it's not something I think that that sounds nice to any Nigerian at this particular point in time. Now let us go back. This President Tinubu came on board, and then one thing Nigeria shouted against was when they went to COP28 with 1,411 delegates, and Nigerians came out to say, this is not desirable at a time when you're removing subsidy, and then you're telling us to manage. But the presidency came to say, okay, fine. I think that the truth of the issue is that we only funded about over 400 official delegates. We understood that, and then he came on board to explain more. Some policies to say, okay, fine, I have understood with you, we are reducing the number of people traveling with us abroad and all of that. And then, yes. And then he said, from now henceforth, among my staffers, we just have 20%, then for internally 25%. And even in terms of security details, we will not be taking people from Abuja. The old states will be providing, those security officials to reduce the cost of governance, while for the vice president, if I'm not mistaken, he said 5, and for the first lady to 5, and for ministers 4. I think that was quite a good idea. But then there are structural issues. One is the fact that we are operating a very, very expensive system. Look at our legislature. We are operating a bicameral legislature at a time when it is very, very expensive to manage. And people say, oh, it is difficult for us to go back to a unicameral legislation. I say, no, there are evidences there, and it's not like it has not been done in Africa. In 2012, Senegal was operating a bicameral legislation, and they went back to a unicameral legislation. Mauritania in 2017 did the same thing. Italy in 2019 reduced their legislatures House of the Senate from 630 members to 400 members, and then House of Rep from, I think, 315 to 200 members. So it is not like these things are not possible. And if you say if you love Nigeria, these are the things we want to see you do to ensure that, to show that, you appreciate the sufferings of the common people. We have advocated at our center for inclusion of women, and we are very, very happy that this women bill is moving on forward and all of that. But I'm worried about one thing. Are the males going to sacrifice, or they want to even create extra seats just to accommodate women?
Can that be connected with the 48 or so ministers that we have right now? Is the government essentially bloated, too bloated that we can't afford what we currently have right now?
Yes, it's really, sincerely, it's bloated. Going back to Resonance report, what did the Resonance say? And let's not even forget that when that report was written, I think we had over 500 agencies and all of that. We have more than now, right? And then
there's one or two bills that in the National Assembly that it's about to create
new ones. And it says we don't need more than 161, agencies. And he said, okay, 52 has to be merged, 38 scrapped, and then 14, subsumed other different, departments. So if you're looking at that, when I would think that the Resonance Committee would look at this government and say, probably we are not serious. Really, at a time where our debt profile is rising so much and all of that, you are increasing the number of ministers, and some of them are just doing cross-cutting duties. I basically watched the ministerial briefing during the 1 year, and some of those things were just very cross-cutting. I feel one person can really, can really handle those things, really. So why are you wasting Nigerians' money at a time when we don't have the money?
All right. You said something that was instrumental. When this government announced well over 3 months ago that they will be dusting off the Science report, that received a lot of ovation, across boards, because it felt like something we should have done a long time ago. But given a sense of what has happened since then, and in this case, the government action itself, since that pronouncement and the timeline they gave themselves, which they have not met, this same government has been pushing for the replacement of the presidential fleet and putting up arguments that suggest that the current presidential fleet, with an average age of about 11 years, it's a flying casket compared to the United States, where we have seen the Air Force One in service since the 1990s. This same government, of course, like you mentioned, is now wanting to create another ministry. Do you think they really understand the whole concept of cutting down on the size of our bureaucracy?
No, they don't. And I would really say that the Tinubu administration, they really know how to use words, and they say if you watch their ceremonial addresses, you'll be like, so these people know all of these things, and why are they really not doing it? Yeah. So for example, 57.6 billion, went to SUVs for the National Assembly, with an extra 2.9 billion. 6 billion for car park, 5 billion for a yacht,
18 billion for the vice president.
Exactly. So those kind of things are very, very insensitive to the plight of Nigerians. I think there's really a very big disconnect. It is either they don't believe that Nigerians are suffering, or they are simply insensitive to the plight of Nigerians. Because really, I think that when I look at the insecurity level, looking at the figures and all of that, I sometimes I really feel that Nigerians are very resilient. Because really, with the level of poverty that we have, and let's not forget that the report that says 133 million Nigerians are poor, was done before subsidies. So you can imagine how many persons have been pushed down to the poverty level.
Yeah.
So I think that the Nigerians are resilient. Why am I saying so? It is because the level of conflict that we even have, it's really minor, and based on the fact that different adaptation strategies have been adopted by people. Because at this level, we are pushing ourselves to the brink. think, really.
Right. Just to go through the history of some of these government initiatives over the same particular issue that the Tinubu administration is trying to address with this livestock committee that we understand might become a ministry eventually. Dating back 1999, for instance, started with the Obasanjo administration, the National Livestock Development Project. The year of inception was in 1999. Then in 2001, the Grazing Reserve Development Program, then the National Fadama Development Project, then the Presidential Initiative on Livestock in 2005, then the Livestock Productivity and Resilience Support Program in 2014, and then there's another one in 2008, by the way, the National Agricultural Technology Program and the National Program on Food Security, as well as the Agricultural Transformation Agenda. The Bola administration left with the National Livestock Transformation Plan. We also had the whole Ruga, initiative and all of that. Why, just to piggyback off of the point you made earlier, why can't this be just an initiative, a program that can operate within the existing structure of government under the Ministry of Agriculture, for instance? Why does it have to be separated there? And do you seem to understand the thinking of the Tinubu administration because of the obvious issue of the farmer herders clashes and all the other issues attached to it socially and politically? Why this needs to be separated from what we already have?
So, I mean, if you look at the issues critically, I think that when the leadership of Nigeria is faced, and it's not just the Tinubu government, when we are faced with a particular challenge, we look for the easy way out and some form of avoidance mechanism. I don't think that if all of these strategies are already in place, you just need one Minister of Agriculture and some department leads, to say you are in charge of this and report back to me. That even make coordination easier. So, for example, now we look at our security agencies. Now we are every day we are talking about interagency rivalry, interagency non-collaboration, and all of that. Look at NATCOM and the other people that control proliferation of light weapons. Simply same thing. Look at the issue we are having with Police Service Commission and the police and all of those issues to an extent where they
recruitment.
Exactly. So we can avoid these things.
So the bigger the government, the more complicated
the more complicated it is, really, because now you're reporting to two ministers, and those two ministers will probably be saying, well, I think you're funding livestock more, you're not funding crop more, and all of that, and you're creating all sorts of issues. So I think that at a time where we're having farmer-herder conflict and we need them to work together, why don't we make them work together in one ministry? Why are we even separating them at this particular point in time? So we now have possibly a minister that protects crops, another one that protects farmers, and then so you have institutionalized this division. So I don't think that it is actually necessary.
As a researcher, help us understand what appears to be the complete disconnect between government and research resources, let me not say institutions, that exist. Some of the things we want to do with this presidential initiative, are they not things that a research institute within the universities can handle? If you have a special center for livestock breed in ATBU or in Usman Danfodio University or ABU, is it out of place to say this presidential initiative will be piloted or superintended by this research institute, and you have commissioned them to do something for the country because they already have the manpower, they are already earning salaries from the government, probably allowance to further expand the scope of their work. Why are we finding it difficult to use existing institutions for things that are relevant to them, and rather we keep setting up ad hoc structures, duplicating ad hoc structures that would remain for the lifespan of this administration, drawing money for all kind of ad hoc functions? Why is that difficult?
Well, I think it's the same reason why Nigerian politicians will not use the hospitals in Nigeria. They prefer to travel abroad. When you've not funded these people, when ASU is always going on strike and all of that, when you know that probably you've not created the equipment for them to work with, you don't even have faith and trust in those institutions. And I think that's what is happening. Let us look at when COVID-19 came on board. The mandate of many Western countries was like, okay, where are our researchers? Where are our research institutions? Go and work and then give us, and then within how many months we had a vaccine. I am not sure that the Nigerian government will trust, any research institution that much because they know they've not been funding them. They basically most of the researchers are self-funded, either in some cases with non-governmental organizations helping and all of that. So we need to even go back to whether or not they are just there like the NNPC receiving salaries or something, really. So because if we are dealing with all of these things, and it's not just about even in terms of science in terms of crops and animals, even in terms of the politics of the state, really. You have the political science department, sociology department that should create templates for government. And when you're looking for advisors, those are your first point of call to say, well, can we even operationalize this? Can we simulate this to see if it's going to work or not? But they know, and by virtue of the kind of government that we have, they have special advisors. Yes, they don't listen to advice, and really, because they don't want to even do the right thing, they just feel that there is no need to even go to those research institutes, really. And moreover, if they go there, really, and the things are done the right way, probably they will not even have some money to steal anymore. So I say it's a very, very complicated situation in Nigeria.
And just to bring back the Oronsai report, because a lot of people were excited about what it promises going forward. If you have a lean federal government, it means that resources might be readily available, and perhaps things can get done faster because now you've streamlined the bureaucracy, and the files don't have to go through several channels before things get implemented. However, the disappointment is quite obvious for people who have been tracking this particular development. Does the body language of the president or the administration suggest that they're no longer going in that direction?
Well, I said somewhere else.
Because a lot of people will have to lose their jobs, obviously, and I think maybe politically that might not be a good thing.
I said somewhere else that when the president or the representative of the president said that no one is going to lose their jobs, I said that sounds technical, but not politically, more political, but not technically correct. The president knows that if eventually it takes a lot of political will for you to implement that report. And I'm thinking that if the president might be reconsidering, because of the issue of politics, maybe Nigerian presidents, they have a way of doing, signing some of the very lofty bills in their second tenure. Maybe in the second tenure we might see this come to fruition. But for now, I actually do not see that happening, especially at a time where you are creating more ministries, more commission and agencies to accommodate political gladiators, really, to ensure that you prepare yourself for a second. Let's not forget, these politicians are looking at every election cycle, and I can tell you really that the preparation for the next cycle of elections have started already.
Absolutely.
Yes.
How much role can technology play in this whole concept of cutting the size of government? Because it does appear, like you said, apart from having overlapping functions by the existing agencies, there are several responsibilities that have migrated digital in saner climes, that we would rather
civil servants are not going to enjoy what you're about to say.
and that is why when you go to the teaching hospitals, you get referrals, and until they transport your file from point A to point B, you can't see the consultant, and that can take eternity. And when you show up, they will tell you they are trying to pile up as many files as possible, and the people waiting for these consultations are dying on a daily basis. Sometimes your file gets to a consultant and the person they're already celebrating 40 days. They're already having his 40 days without prayer. The point is, how much of technology do we need to adopt to not just cut down the size of government, but to also improve efficiency and turnaround time as far as our systems are concerned? And if you can help us with some of the places where you think we can deploy some of these technologies to improve.
Well, interesting. You made me remember when Goodluck Jonathan says he will fight corruption with technology and all of that, and people misunderstood him. Yeah, I think technology is very, very important. So for a typical example is, the lawmakers will say, well, the big salaries that we earn are basically because we have a lot of staffers, a lot of researchers working with us and all of that. And I will say that in a very modern world, really, in many instances, you don't even need a secretary anymore, right? You have your computer. You have different artificial intelligence platforms that, just it's at your fingertips. You just put on this, and they give you the preliminary information that you need. After you're not going to publish in a journal paper, right? You just need the information. They will give you that information, and then you read, and then do that. So it means that you and just maybe 3 other persons, you can do that job. Even in terms of the civil service, we have all kinds of people, messengers and different kinds of people in our civil service.
Okay.
And until now, we have people using typewriters, still employed, in our civil service. Maybe the flip side of the argument can be that if we throw them out of the civil service, they will lack jobs. That would be the argument. But the real deal is that we need as much technology as possible, and we've tried it in several instances. Let's look at this harmonized federation account now, right? We use technology, and then it's working. Let's look at the Beaver system. The Beaver system, it's basically it harmonizes all of your accounts, and that is working on very well. So it is even going to close that gap in terms of corruption. I mean, let's not forget that there are different ways of fighting corruption. One is prevention. And in terms of prevention, technology comes in handy. Beyond the Obasanjo era, where we could say, and many people will argue that the anti-graft agencies were used to pursue perceived enemies or whatever. But we saw them do some work. During the Jonathan period, we had some law, and then when it came to Buhari's time, he came on the mantra of fighting corruption, but we did not see that much. But I think that to even make the anti-corruption agencies more effective, you have to block the loopholes. If you separate the yam from the goat, you don't need to worry about the yam eating the goat.
No, the goat
the goat eating the yam, rather.
Logically, the bigger the government, the bigger public expenditure, isn't it? The bigger the public expenditure, the bigger the debt, especially in our case, for instance. The bigger the debt, the bigger the financial strain on the economy, right? Help me understand why the Tinubu administration, I mean, it prides itself on, being evidence-based, being quite logical with all the economic reforms that it's trying to put in place and things like that. It doesn't make sense on paper for the size of government to grow amidst all this economic hardship that we're facing right now. But apparently, they're trying to do a lot more, create all of these, situations where we're trying to tackle one issue by creating a ministry or a commission or a department to handle one specific issue. A lot of people think that because of the man that has been appointed to chair, that perhaps we're going to see some sort of movement in addressing this recurrent issue of farmer-herder clashes. For instance, we're going to see a much more proactive position on grazing reserves and so on and so forth. Give me your understanding on what the government can achieve by, right-sizing the government, not necessarily downsizing, but right-sizing it so much so that it could be a single-purpose, vehicle, that once it achieves this, it can be phased out, and then, or perhaps maybe march into an already existing structure. Because it's safe to say that the president is not particularly confident about what the Ministry of Agriculture could do with this one, and perhaps maybe that's why he's thinking in this direction. Yeah,
so that's actually very important. So for example, for the farmer-herder conflict, you probably could set up a commission, to say for the next 2 years, this is your mandate. Do this, and after you've done this, submit the report to the Ministry of Agriculture, and your job ends there. You don't necessarily need to, need to snowball into a full-blown ministry. And that is what I've been saying, that the government says quite a lot of nice things, and really, unlike the Buhari's administration, where they were quite insensitive to media pronunciations, this government knows how to say the right things, but they don't do it. So for example, in 2023, the total amount that was earmarked for travels, foreign travels, was 2.49 billion. But in 6 months, from June thereabout to December, the Tinubu administration spent 3.4 billion naira for travels, but yet you want to manage. So it doesn't really add up with the conversation does not really add up. We have all of the structures in place. I think in the US, if I'm not mistaken, they have about 18 departments, what they call ministries. Are we more efficient than the US? So it is not really about
it's a significantly larger economy.
Yeah.
100 times perhaps bigger than Nigeria's economy right now. But it's a much leaner government. And also that leads us to the next argument, where in the economics of things, the bigger the government gets, it crowds out the private sector, doesn't it? It pushes them out because government is virtually in every other business where it is essentially only supposed to regulate.
And also, I mean, one point also is that it creates too many spheres of competition, really, too many spheres of competition. I will think that if the government invests that amount of money in the private sector, where Nigerians are trying to do a lot of things in technology, look at our fintech industries coming up. Nigerians are trying to do a lot of importation and exportation and all of that. If you put all of those monies in SMEs, I think it would. And if you do it the right way, devoid of corruption, devoid of political affiliation and all of that, you will boost the economy. Let's not forget, once you put politicians in power, it's an opportunity for them. And till we change the character of the Nigerian state, all of these things will not work. Until the character of our politicians change, it's another opportunity for them to bring their cronies to power. So I'm really, really worried about this.
There's also the question, Sunday, about our 20+ trillion budget, for instance, that has a huge deficit to it, and you have, say, 48 ministries, right? To share those monies across these 48 ministries based on competing demands itself is a strain. But imagine if there were just 20, for instance, then there will be a lot more available for them to actually do. And ergo, why we see so many ministries not able to achieve their target objectives at the end of the day, because the resources to actually finance their activities is actually not there, because the government is spread too thin to a point where the resources available cannot actually be widely distributed. And I suppose adding another ministry to the mix doesn't help, matters financially.
So probably this is actually some call for. Probably we might begin to see new forms of taxation. Maybe before you see livestock,
just to finance
livestock taxation, and it's very funny taxations. Let's not forget the Cybercrime Act has been there, and all of a sudden, it was amended in a manner that did not have so much of public input. And the thing that stood out in that act was not the involvement of taxation or the enforcement of taxation, because the government wants to make money with every means possible.
Give me a sense of where you think this campaign should then move to. If we are finding, if the reformer is finding it difficult to drive reforms, where does the help lies for us? Is it going to be a citizen-led initiative, to push for this kind of reforms? Is this something you think we can find any kind of success, say, with the National Assembly, if we can get them to take up, the campaign to drive the executives to implementing things that would enable? Because, in the long run, it will also affect them, because for the longest time, we have argued about whether a bicameral legislature is still desirable in today's Nigeria, given our circumstances. But since those who are benefiting from this whole thing, would not honestly push for this reform, is this something that a citizen-led initiative can help us achieve?
Yes. There's one thing that is very sure, and that's the fact that nobody uses power against himself. Nobody who holds power uses power against himself consciously. So it would mean that we just have one group of persons that we can rely to, and that's the government of the people, the citizens, really. And how will that work? The one thing that will make all of these processes work is to ensure that our electoral process is free, fair, and credible. Because there is nothing you will say to these people that will make them listen to you if they know that they can come into power, without your help or without your input. So once our electoral process becomes very credible, they will know that they will come back to us, and whether right or wrong, whatever the citizens say, they would probably want to believe them. Let's not forget, the recent activities in Kenya, We saw how the power of the citizen was reflected. This is not outside Africa. This is Africa. I mean, and the government had to listen, really. So it means the Nigerians have to realize the power of the citizenry, devoid of religious and ethnic divisions. If not, it is not happening. Let's go back to the national anthem bill. In 2 weeks, that bill was passed. Look at how fast it was passed, and the president had to come to the National Assembly just to sing the national anthem. Really. So you can imagine that the things they prioritize, the things that they look at, some kind of nostalgia, they fight for it. And I was simply afraid. I was like, if that kind of law can be passed, and the National Assembly is such a very pliant one to the executive, I was afraid that what if it was a bill that has to elongate the tenure of the president? So there are fundamental questions. So let us go back, strengthen our civil society organizations, and begin to push back at this. I don't believe that the change will come from the top. It will come from the people themselves, and we must be united, devoid of religion and ethnicity for us to achieve this.
And that looks almost impossible to achieve at this moment in time because of the polarization within the polity itself. The social fabric, you can tell, has been greatly diminished to a point where it's very difficult for people to unite. I mean, we can't even unite to support the organized labor, for instance, who are pushed to drive for better wages because some people think, it's disrupting their businesses, and we're not necessarily a big picture people for the most part of the argument about what comes next for Nigeria and indeed Nigerians. Well, it remains to be seen when Professor Jega and his team are going to commence work and whether the federal government is going to actually double down on creating a new ministry to the already existing new ones that we have not seen much of. The blue economy, for instance, and the likes.
Has been in the news.
Exactly, that have not lived up to expectation yet. And it's partly because of some of the issues that you've pointed out, limited resources and the overcrowding within the civil service itself. The infrastructure for them to even operate with. We understand that most of them don't have the manpower to actually do what needs to be done to get, the president realize his renewed hope agenda. But we're going to anchor the conversation here. Dengiyefa, Angalapu, as always, it's a pleasure to have you join us on the program.
Thank you most
kindly for your time.
Thank you for
I appreciate the analysis. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in just a moment to bring you up to date with the latest stories making the rounds across some select national dailies. Newspaper review is up next.